And we have some breaking news on top of the show at this point of time, and this is regarding Maduro's, the ousted Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro's military complex bombed. We now have the satellite images which show the extent of damage. We are learning that 3 military complexes were attacked by the US military forces, and the military complex, Fuertea Tiona, were bombed. The satellite images of Caracas military complex is there on your screens right now, the before and the after image when the US military carried out the attack and captured the Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife, the Venezuelan First Lady. But right now, what we're breaking on top of the show is the satellite images of the Caracas military complex, which was attacked by the US military. All right, for more on this, Trini Mina Mary is now joining me live from Caracas in Venezuela. Trini, thanks very much for joining us on NDTV. First up, you're joining us live from Venezuela. What is the sentiment, the situation on ground at this point of time after your president being captured by the US President Donald Trump?
Well, the most recent information that we have so far is that the Supreme Court of Venezuela has designated Delcy Rodriguez, which was the vice president, now is the president in charge, according to the Supreme Court of Venezuela. She will be taking all the decisions on the absence of Nicolas Maduro inside of Venezuela, because they claim that Nicolas Maduro continues to be the president of Venezuela, but he was kidnapped by the US. It is important to remark that most of the institutions in Venezuela are government controlled. Most of the judges of the Supreme Court were designated by Nicolas Maduro. Also, the members of the National Assembly, they are the majority of them, the 90% of them belongs to the government party. So most of the decisions that are coming from the institutions in Venezuela are supported by people loyal to Nicolas Maduro. Today, the environment here in Caracas is in calm. The streets are mostly empty. It is a Sunday. It was a hard Saturday for many Venezuelans who were afraid of after this military action taken by the United States. So far, the country tries to continue their daily routine despite what happened yesterday.
Right, Trini, you've given us a lowdown of all that's happening in Venezuela. Maduro is in the New York detention center, and we are learning that there are some reports of Venezuelans celebrating Maduro's arrest. You're joining us live from Venezuela. If you can just tell us the interpretation of how are Venezuelans feeling right now after Maduro being captured by Trump.
Well, there's mixed feelings. As I said, there's people, groups of people that are government supporters that obviously doesn't allow what happened yesterday. They reject those actions. And in Caracas today, there's a demonstration called for members of the government party that they will show their discontent over these actions. You have other type of Venezuelans and that they feel that that was the right thing to do because they felt that Nicolas Maduro was an authoritarian leader, but inside Venezuela there's not much of that discontent showing in the street because some people fear they could be detained, as I said, for security forces that are loyal to Nicolas Maduro, so they prefer not to express their discontent. Those demonstrations that we have seen of people celebrating are mostly from Venezuelans that are living abroad the country. In Miami, for example, there is a big diaspora. We need to remember that about 8 million people, more than 8 million people migrated from Venezuela due to the critical conditions they were living in the country.
Right, Trini, so you say there's mixed feelings amongst the Venezuelans there on Maduro's capture. Stay with us, Trini. I'll come back to you shortly with more questions and updates. All right, for more on this, my colleague Vishal Vivek is also joining me live. Vishal, over to you. Show us about the extent of damage caused by the US military incursion, perhaps invasion there in Venezuela.
Well, Raisha, we have up on our screens the images that we've just received. This is the satellite image, released by the company called Vantor. Here you can see the parts where we have encircled. These parts show the damage that were done. On the right, you have visuals from the last night when the raids took place, when the strikes took place, and you can see there has been extensive damage to this part. Especially, this is the Fuerte Tijuana, as you rightly mentioned. This is the main military base of the Maduro regime. This was attacked. This was the primary target of the US strikes, in which how many people were killed? Some estimates suggest that at least 40 people were killed in these strikes. Who were the exact targets? That remains to be divulged. We have seen that Maduro was arrested, but these are some latest images, the satellite images that we've gotten, and these are the extensive structures. This is the main military structure, as I rightly mentioned a few moments ago, and this houses defense ministries. This houses many top military installations. This also has some top command infrastructure right in this area. So this was the main target, and it's almost like the top part has almost been obliterated. This is totally bombed out. We have also other images that will have on our screen that will show the extent of damage done. This is the main military base, and you can see the before and after images. This is before the bombings were done, and this is after the bombings. You can see, if you can relate both the pictures, and this is what the Miraflores presidential palace is. This is the main residence of Nicolas Maduro. We are yet to hear whether he was dragged out from that place or not, but these are some of the latest satellite images that we have gathered. You can see the damage. Here there's no damage, and you can see closely the damage was done here. And this is the before image of the presidential palace where Maduro could have been living. He was trying to escape from this place to the Fuerte Tijuana place. He was trying to do that, but he was not successful. He was dragged out of the palace, and the palace also seemingly was attacked. We'll have images on our screen of the palace after the bombing as well. So this shows the level of defness in the operations. And here we have visuals of the missiles raining down on the Caracas skyline. These were some extensive operations conducted within 3 hours. All it took was 5 minutes to get into the compound and drag Maduro out. But this was an extensive operation planned for months, and this is the final result of whatever happened in that operation. Back to you.
Right, absolutely. Thanks, Vishal, for giving us that lowdown of the before-after images of these satellite images of the US attack in Venezuela. Coming back to you, Trini, you're joining us live from Venezuela, just to tell our viewers. The US President Donald Trump also said that apart from US running Venezuela, US will also fix Venezuela's oil reserves. Is there any information on that front? Perhaps is there any US company that is moving towards Venezuela to take in charge of the oil reserves there, which is one of the largest in the world?
Well, first of all, despite the words of President Donald Trump, there's no indication inside the country that the new authorities of Venezuela are willing to do that. For example, Delcy Rodriguez denied most of the statements made by President Donald Trump yesterday. She says that the Venezuelan oil, of course, is the property of Venezuela, and they will continue doing business with international corporations that wants to work inside of Venezuela. One company, U.S. company, still working in the country is Chevron. Chevron has maintained its operation with the authorization of the United States, despite the sanctions, and that is one of the main sources of production, oil production for Venezuela. That U.S. company. Well, it depends what they are talking, if they are talking, and that is the big question, if the new authorities of Venezuela are willing to talk to Donald Trump after that.
Thanks for joining us live from Venezuela and giving us a lowdown of all that's happening on ground zero at this point of time. Thanks very much. All right, to talk more on this, I have a host of experts joining me live. I have with us Professor Andrew Latham. He's a distinguished scholar of international security strategic studies. I also have with us Mr. Rubinder Sachdev, foreign affairs expert, and Vivek Mishra, Deputy Director, Strategic Studies Program, Fellow Americas at ORF. Welcome to NDTV, gentlemen. First up, coming to you, Professor Latham. How do you see things at this point of time? The US president abducts rather a sitting Venezuelan president. He is right now at a detention center in New York, and he says that US will run Venezuela.
Well, as we all know, the president is given to, shall we say, rhetorical flourishes that bear little resemblance to the actual facts on the ground. This is what's happened in the last 48 hours or so, maybe even 24 hours. The Venezuelan regime has been decapitated. It has not been changed. It has not been broken. It has not been disassembled. There are multiple tiers, and that regime remains in place, resilient, and operating minus its leader. So that's the reality on the ground. Donald Trump and the U.S. government are not running anything within Venezuela. They're applying leverage, as they have been for many years now. They're applying pressure, but they're not running anything directly or indirectly. The Venezuelans are still in control of Venezuela. What has happened, though, is that the United States has violated international law, clearly, and that the president has probably violated the U.S. Constitution and the War Powers Resolution of 1973. He certainly stretched it beyond the bounds of any previous president, including George Bush Sr., who launched a similar invasion of Panama back in 1989, on exactly the same day, January 3rd, by the way. And there's going to be political fallout. If Congress would actually do anything in the United States to push back against presidents when they do things like this, presidents wouldn't do things like this. But so far, they haven't.
Right, Professor Latham. Coming to Mr. Sachdev, your viewpoint, do you think that what Trump has done, that he can perhaps act recklessly in pursuit of his own foreign policy goals at this point of time? With, of course, the eye on the oil reserves there in Venezuela, which is the largest in the world that we have today.
Thank you. Certainly. See, on the first count, Trump administration is positioning this as a law enforcement action. What they're saying in the press conference, they said it was an operation of the Department of Justice to bring back a criminal drug trafficker into America, supported by the Department of War. That is, the Department of Defense or the Department of War played a supporting role. So that's how he'll try to work his way through countering these arguments that he did not have approval from the Congress, etc. Now, coming to the second point, moot point, that how will the US run Venezuela? It seems that Trump is looking to maybe appoint a viceroy. Marco Rubio, I think the Washington Post today is carrying an article which says that because given his expertise in these affairs and all, and his deep involvement, he could be the point person. When asked who would be the team, he said, this is the team. What it seems to me will happen is that Trump will put together a team, of course, Hexeth and Rubio and a few others, especially of executives from the oil industry, be it Chevron, which is already on the ground, be it ExxonMobil or Shell.
Right.
These oil companies and their executives have vast experiences of toppling governments, assassinations in Africa, other countries, and working out deals and projects, right? So he would involve such wheeler-dealer executives in this team to work out what should be the formula in Venezuela, and they'll be in connect with the opposition, which they already are. They're in connect with the interim president, but more the opposition, Gonzalez, who's sitting in Spain, and the lady who got the Nobel Prize, working with them that how would they structure or agree to an arrangement with America in terms of the oil assets, which should be, where the production of the oil should go up, more Venezuelan oil should flow in the world market. By the way, that would have a helpful impact for America and for Trump in the midterm elections. If
Mr. Sachdev. Right. Of course, just to add to that, drug trafficker out of Venezuela, but there has been no proof of that given by the US president. Coming to you, Mr. Mishra, what do you make of all of this? Trump has promised to run Venezuela and make way for US oil companies in Venezuela. But like Mr. Sachdev also pointed out, that there is a long history of how US interventions in Latin America has perhaps not gone down really well. Do you think this time it will change?
So I think Trump has positioned himself very delicately between a regime change and not, because he has apparent. I mean, there are theories that he's struck a kind of a deal with Delcy Rodriguez, who is in conversation with her, because clearly replacing Maduro with, let's say, Marino Machado would have been a much more drastic measure, which would have not gone down really well in the region. And if we can go by the reactions of these countries for the regional countries, I mean, Brazil, Mexico, two major countries, have repositioned them very delicately, not criticizing, not over criticizing, positioning them on the lines of international law. So I think we see that there is a delicate balancing there by Trump. How this is received in the region is also something that I think is still to unfold, given the statements that have come from Trump on Colombia and its leader. So I think the national security strategy of the United States has certainly called for an enlisting and expanding motto, which I think we are seeing unfold. And initially many of us thought that these are political wins of Donald Trump, but I think we are coming a full circle to that.
Right, and at this point of time, Venezuela simply does not produce enough oil to make that big a difference. But gentlemen, stay with us. I'll come back to you in just moments from now. We go across to another pertinent questions that our guests here have been making and that we've been telling you here on NDTV. That is, does the United States of America actually need Venezuela's oil? Now, US perhaps has world's largest oil producer. US accounts for a fifth of global production. Apart from that, US output ballooned due to shale revolution. Meanwhile, when we talk about Venezuela, around 1% of global production takes place in Venezuela. Let's also now tell you, why does the United States of America want Venezuela's oil after that statement by the US President Donald Trump, where he said that US will fix Venezuela's oil infrastructure? Number one, US shale oil tends to be light. US refineries set up primary for heavy crude, and Venezuela, on the other hand, has the largest oil reserves. Now, most of Venezuela's oil is heavy crude, and if US wants gasoline, it needs heavy oil. Lastly, let's take you through the global oil reserves. Now, Venezuela, that's there on the map, 302.3. When you talk about Saudi Arabia, 266.2. And Canada, 170.5, Iran, 157.2 here on the world map, Iraq, 148.8. Kuwait, on the other hand, is at 101.5. These are the global oil reserves, according to oil reserves in billions of barrels. UAE is positioned at 97.8, Russia at 80.0, and Libya at 48.4. Moving to Nigeria, which is at around 37.5, and lastly, United States of America at 35.0. And while we have our guest still here with us, coming to you, Mr. Sachdev, we just told our viewers, does the United States of America actually need the oil reserves? Do you think that the capture of the Venezuelan president, him being there at New York detention center, is all about natural resources?
It is definitely all about that, but I think there's an equally other pillar also, which is to get rid of any leftist, socialist governments in the neighborhood, in the region. Repeatedly, Trump and his general yesterday were talking about a Western hemisphere, and Trump repeatedly saying, we want neighbors who are good and friendly with us and aligned with us, right? So oil and resources are definitely one pillar. The other is, not allowing China or socialist thought. The other thing, coming back to the formula for the oil, so what Trump would be looking to do is probably that the oil which is extracted, sure, a percentage of that, profits from the oil would go to the Venezuelan government, should go. A percentage would go to the oil company which is extracting, and a percentage of the oil profits, I think Trump will demand for the US government itself. Okay. The parallel being, if you look at, like, let's say the semiconductor chips and all, NVIDIA, Intel, NVIDIA allowed to sell chips to China But US says that the government will get a 15% cut on the revenues of the chips which Nvidia sells to China. Trump will look at this in a similar manner, that the oil fine extracted, whatever, a certain percentage of the oil revenue or profits come to the US Treasury, which helps him balance out or some way look at the debt which is out there.
Right.
The other thing quickly in terms of political, domestic within US,
Right.
the prices of oil would come down, even though Venezuela produces very little, but it could be ramped up. Chevron is already there, it could ramp up. It's expected, some analysts are saying that oil prices could come down to even 45 odd dollars per barrel in the next 6 to 9 months, which will coincide with the midterm elections of the US Congress.
All
that
right.
will help Trump in that also.
All right, Mr. Sachdev, you've given your analysis. I want to take that to you, Mr. Mishra. Now, at the center of all of this, of course, is Venezuela's oil trove. But I want to ask you that despite Venezuela being the home to the largest proven oil reserve on earth, it's at this point of time, its potential far outweighs its output. In other words, Venezuela right now simply does not produce enough oil to make that bigger difference. How do you see that changing forward, with US saying that we will take control of the oil reserves there in Venezuela?
It sounds to me something like the critical mineral story, which means that, there is a huge potential, but you don't have the mining capacities around the world. Now you take that analogy to Venezuela and you have a lot of oil reserves, but you don't have the capacity. I mean, they're producing, as you said, they have more than 300 billion of reserves, but they're producing less than 1%. Now, I think what the global, what the process of Trump really is to denationalize and allow more companies to come in and compete. I think that process is going to take some time before it really unravels in the way that Trump wants. But it could be faster than critical minerals and the processing, because oil is something that you could do faster in terms of bringing capacities and opening it up to the markets. Because as you said, Chevron and other companies were already involved. The shipping lanes are already established. But I think the political intent is something that will have to take a buy-in from internally within Venezuela, and then sort of link it with the rest of the world if Trump wants to bring in American companies, recenter them in Venezuela, and work with the Venezuelan government in whichever form to take it to different parts of the world. But my larger point is how will it be perceived in the region? And I think with a lot of caution, because given the relationship and given the nature of the developments that have happened in the past 48 hours.
Right. I've been told I have 4 odd minutes left. Professor Latham, your final thoughts. How do you see the situation panning out moving forward?
Well, it's an undetermined outcome at this point. There are many scenarios that could unfold. Business as usual, increased American influence, civil war, collapse. There are all kinds of things that could happen now that Maduro has been removed. And I think politics and political narratives, like nature, always abhor a vacuum. And when we don't know what the future is like, we tend to impose all of our predispositions and priors. Some people think this is U.S. imperialism. Okay, great. There's a story to be told there. Some people think it's all about domestic politics, diverting attention from the Epstein files and the bad economic situation in the U.S. Some people think it's just about geopolitics. It's about the national security strategy and hemispheric sphere of influence for the United States. We don't know, A, how the decision was made, B, what the implications will be, and therefore, and this is natural and normal, we as human beings tend to fill in the blanks with our priors. I guess my advice to my students certainly is, let's wait and see, because this story is far from over.
Mr. Sachdev, your final thoughts. As we speak, the Vice President of Venezuela is in charge there. Trump says U.S. will run Venezuela. How do you see the situation panning out, the implications, the consequences moving forward?
But quickly, I did to what Professor said and our colleague, Mr. Mishra also said. What I would say is that look out for Colombia and Cuba. He mentioned 3 countries today, Colombia, Cuba, and Mexico. Mexico, not a regime change or not decapitating, because different things, but Colombia definitely yes, and Cuba also in the line coming up. In Mexico, Trump could go in for targeted attacks on, again, quote-unquote, drug lords, etc. But therein he would not, be looking for a regime change. But in Colombia and Cuba, they would very much want to precipitate. Secondly, as of now, in Venezuela, as your report on the ground was saying, the army is standing with the previous regime or with the current regime, which is there. It's only been decapitated. All the officials are there. So it'll be very interesting to see how that, even the Cuban diaspora in America would vote more enthusiastically for the Republicans, because they'll see that Trump and his administration are taking effective steps again, quote unquote, what they call as dictatorships.
Right. Right. We'll have to leave it there. Thanks very much, gentlemen, for joining us on NDTV and sharing insights with us. All right. On that note, we slip into a very short break, but come right back. Lots landed for you here on NDTV 24/7.